and Orphan brought the billionaire's heart back to life. Then fate cruelly snatched her away. Not every house is a home. Some are lavish museums, displaying a life so perfect it feels cold and hollow. And in one such mansion, nestled in the glamorous hills of Beverly Hills, our story begins. The sharp click of the electronic lock echoed through the silence, breaking the stillness like a crack of thunder. Michael Carter, 45 years old, dressed in a tailored designer suit, walked in. Motion sensor lights flickered on with each step he took, dancing across polished marble floors and walls adorned with expensive abstract art. This multi-million-dollar house welcomed its owner with soulless luxury. There were no greetings, no aroma of food, only the soft hum of the central air system. Michael loosened his tie, his tired eyes sweeping across the vast living room. Everything was immaculate, flawless, and empty. The silence of this house carried its own crushing weight, pressing down on his shoulders more than any boardroom negotiation ever could. Upstairs, at the end of a long hallway, Elise, his wife, was carrying out a ritual that had become second nature. This room was unlike any other, painted a soft sky blue, with hand-painted white clouds drifting across the ceiling. In the corner stood an intricately carved wooden crib, the blankets inside neatly folded. Lined up on the shelves were untouched wooden toys, waiting for tiny hands that would never come. This was Leo's room, the son they never got to see grow up. 7 years had passed since the accident, but every single day, Elise came in to clean. She wiped each rail of the crib, adjusted the stuffed animals as if Leo had just stepped outside to play and would be back any minute. It wasn't about keeping the room tidy. It was about keeping the memory alive, about punishing herself in quiet sorrow. That night, the air at the dinner table was colder than the salad on their plates. October 15th, Leo's death anniversary. "I want to visit his grave tomorrow," Elise said softly, her voice nearly drowned out by the clinking of silverware against porcelain. Michael didn't even look up. "I have a crucial meeting with the Japanese partners tomorrow. It can't be rescheduled," he replied sharply. Elise stared at her husband. The man she once loved so fiercely, now just a shell of himself, hiding behind work-like armor. That night, unable to sleep, Elise wandered into Michael's study. She opened the bottom drawer, one he rarely touched, and discovered a small wooden box. The moment she opened it, her world stopped spinning. A photo of an unfamiliar woman, a love letter, and then her eyes froze on something that made her blood turn to ice. The date on the letter, October 15th, 7 years ago, the day of the accident. Before she could finish reading, her knees buckled beneath her. Her body went weak, her mind swirling in a storm of betrayal. All she could hear was the deafening roar inside her own head. Completely disoriented, she grasped blindly for something, anything to hold on to. Her hand knocking a box off the desk, sending it crashing to the floor. The sudden noise jolted her back, grounding her breath by breath. No, this wasn't something she could bury anymore. The crushing pain of the last 7 years quickly melted into an icy, calculated rage. Elise grabbed the wooden box, feeling the weight of deception in her hands, and marched straight to the bedroom. She flipped on the light switch. A blinding white light flooded the room, forcing Michael's sleepy eyes open. "Elise?" He blinked, confused. "What's going on?" She didn't answer. She walked to the bed, opened the box, and threw the photo and the letter onto the comforter in front of him. "Sophia," she said, her voice razor-sharp, void of all emotion. "Explain this, Michael." Michael looked down at the damning evidence scattered across the bed. His expression shifted from groggy confusion to sheer panic, then drained of all color. Where did you find this?" he stammered. It's just the past, Elise. It happened a long time ago. A long time ago? Elise let out a hoarse, bitter laugh. Then why does the date on this letter match the day our son died? Don't you dare tell me this is just some coincidence. His silence was louder than any confession. Yes, he finally whispered, defeated. Sophia. She was an old colleague. We had a thing for a while. I was planning to end it. That night. In the car, we were arguing because of her. She had texted me. A memory Elise had fought to bury. A piece of the puzzle doctors had blamed on trauma. Suddenly came rushing back, clear as day. The shouting, the glow of his phone screen. His furious expression as he swatted it away. So it's true, Elise breathed. Each word like a blade slicing through flesh. You were distracted. You lied. You lied to the police, to the doctors. And you lied to me for 7 years. You let me rot in guilt. Punish myself. While you knew exactly what happened. I'm sorry. Michael burst out, his defensiveness crumbling into desperation. You think I wanted this to happen? I've lived with it every single day. Every day I look at you. I see Leo's empty room, and I hate myself. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to lose you. Because I knew. I knew you'd look at me just like you're looking at me right now. How am I looking at you? Elise snapped, her rage exploding. Like a liar? A coward? Or a man who killed his own son? Her words hit like a thunderous slap. Both of them froze, the air thick with the brutal finality of what had just been said. Their world, already cracked and fragile, shattered completely in that moment. Without hesitation, Elise turned away. She stormed into the walk-in closet, yanked out a suitcase, and began throwing clothes into it in a frenzied blur. Where are you going? Michael asked, his voice trembling. Somewhere I can breathe, Elise answered, not looking back. I signed up for a volunteer trip in Santa Barbara starting next week, but I don't think I'm going to wait. I'm leaving now. I can't stay in this house with you for one more second. She zipped up the suitcase. Don't come looking for me. The sound of suitcase wheels scraping across marble floors echoed through the emptiness. The front door slammed shut, leaving Michael alone in a house that felt colder than ever before. The final wall of lies had collapsed, burying what little remained of their family. Elise didn't leave to find peace. She left to escape the unbearable truth. That her home had been built on a lie that cost her son his life. But what she didn't know was that beyond the wreckage and heartbreak, fate was waiting for her, with a life-changing encounter that would alter everything. Some escapes don't lead us to peace. They just throw us into another storm. Elise's white Mercedes sped down the highway, leaving behind the lights of Los Angeles and 7 years of lies. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to leave. Eventually, the wheels came to a stop in Santa Barbara, a town that had just been ravaged by a real storm, as if the skies themselves mirrored the wreckage inside her. She came here to run from one demon, but instead, she found a chained angel. A few days later, Elise stood in a world that couldn't be more different from the life she had left behind. The smell of wet mud and destruction filled her lungs, replacing the expensive perfume and sterile air of her mansion. Relief workers and volunteers hurried around her, and amidst the chaos, she noticed a small figure. A little girl, maybe 7 years old, tangled hair, dirt-streaked face, crouched on the foundation of what was once a home, now flattened. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She just stared at the world with the wild, haunted eyes of a wounded animal. Elise moved toward the girl, something instinctual, motherly, pulling her forward. But just as she got within a few feet, a broken brick came flying through the air, slicing past her cheek by mere inches. A thin line of blood welled up on her skin. She stood frozen, not from pain, but from the desperate hostility in that little girl's actions. That was Lena. Her parents had been swept away by the floods. She was the only survivor, alone in the ruins of her world. At that moment, a weathered, sharp-faced woman with sly, calculating eyes blocked Elise's path. "You must be from the city, huh? Don't go near her, she's gone mad," the woman snapped, glancing at the scratch on Elise's cheek. "Poor kid. Guess it's up to me to take care of her now," she sighed dramatically, though her gaze lingered just a little too long on Elise's designer handbag. To this woman, the orphaned child wasn't a tragedy, she was an opportunity. Elise wanted to turn around, get in her car, and drive away. This place was too much. Her own grief was already more than she could bear. She hadn't come here to be a hero. But then, her eyes met Lena's again, looking past the dirt and the feral glare. And Elise saw it. Not the sweet, angelic gaze of her son Leo. No, it was something deeper, something emptier. A hollow void of loss. The same look Elise had seen in the mirror every morning for the past 7 years. The same pain, the same unbearable loneliness. Elise knew rushing in wouldn't work, so she chose a different path. On the second day, and then the third, she came back, sitting at a safe distance. She didn't bring candy or toys. Instead, she quietly began picking up broken bricks and splintered wood from around the remains of Lena's old home, stacking them neatly in a row. Her hands that were used to silk, to multi-million-dollar design plans, were now swollen and scratched from rubble and mud. She didn't really know why she was doing it. Maybe, in trying to bring a little order to Lena's chaos, she was also unconsciously trying to piece together the shattered fragments of her own soul. That silent act, repeated day after day, slowly cracked through Lena's defenses. The little girl began to watch Elise, her eyes shifting from fiery hostility to cautious curiosity. On the afternoon of the fourth day, as Elise was lost in the rhythm of stacking bricks, sweat soaking through her shirt, a small shadow fell beside her. Lena had come closer on her own. The girl didn't speak, but her tiny, dirt-streaked hand reached out. Resting in her palm was a wildflower, its petals slightly crumpled, but still holding onto a fierce, brilliant purple. Elise looked up, locking eyes with Lena, and for the first time, she didn't see wildness, she saw deep, aching sadness, and the faintest flicker of hope. Elise took the flower, her fingers trembling. A hot tear traced down her cheek, then another, falling onto the little purple blossom. It wasn't pity, it was recognition. She realized that over these past few days, she hadn't just been stacking bricks, she had been building a bridge. And this child with a single wildflower had just taken her first steps across it, toward her. In that moment, the betrayal, the anger, the lies, all seemed to fade into the background. All that remained were two broken souls, one big, one small, finding comfort in a simple, silent gesture. Elise didn't know if she was crying for the child she lost, or the child she had just found. Maybe it was both. But one thing was clear. She couldn't walk away anymore. Her escape was over. But a new journey, one far harder, far more painful, was only just beginning. Sometimes, love begins with the smallest things. A wildflower, a piece of bread, a gentle stroke of a brush through tangled hair. Amidst the ashes of a storm, Elise and Lena were quietly building a world of their own. Wordless, but full of understanding. Elise had almost forgotten about her husband and the cold, empty house in Beverly Hills. Here, surrounded by mud and loss, for the first time in 7 years, she felt alive. Not just existing, but the past never stays buried. It always finds a way back. One afternoon, The roar of a luxury car engine shattered that fragile peace. A sleek black Audi, absurdly out of place among the ruins, pulled up. Michael stepped out, his suit crisp, his face gaunt from sleepless nights. He had found her. He didn't yell. His voice was low, laced with desperation. "Elise, please, come home." But when his eyes landed on the dirt-covered little girl hiding behind Elise, that desperation hardened into an icy wall. "We're going home. Alone." Elise stood up, shielding Lena like a mother protecting her cub. "This is home too," she said firmly. "And I'm not going anywhere." The real battle didn't explode out there. It happened later, inside a cheap, suffocating motel room that night. "What the hell are you doing, Elise?" Michael snapped. "You're going to bring some random kid home to replace Leo? Our son just died. Our son died 7 years ago, Michael." Elise fired back, tears brimming in her eyes. "And this isn't about replacing anyone. This is a child who needs help." "We can't help anyone," Michael roared, slamming his fist into the wall. And then, his pride crumbled. He slid down to the floor, his voice cracking with sobs. "We don't deserve this, Elise. We don't deserve another child. This is all my fault. All of it. I can't do this again." In that moment, Elise no longer saw a liar. She saw a man eaten alive by guilt. She realized this battle wasn't just about fighting for Lena. It was about saving the man sitting broken in front of her. But outside enemies didn't give them the time to heal. Lena's aunt, spotting Michael and his fancy car, realized this wasn't just tragedy, it was a gold mine. She didn't ask for money anymore. She made a bigger move. She went to Child Protective Services, crying crocodile tears about her poor orphaned niece being kidnapped by a psychologically unstable wealthy couple. Then the worst happened. 2 social workers showed up. With the police. They had a court order to remove Lena to a temporary care center while they awaited a custody hearing. As they approached, Lena, who had just begun to trust, shrank back. Then came a piercing scream. "No!" The first word Elise had ever heard from her. A raw, heartbreaking cry. Lena clung to Elise's leg, her little body trembling violently. One of the social workers gently tried to pry her away. "Sweetheart, come with us. It's just temporary, okay?" Elise knelt down, wrapping Lena in her arms, choking back her own sobs. She looked into Lena's terrified eyes, forcing herself to be strong. "Lena, listen to Mommy," she whispered, the word mommy slipping out naturally, painfully. "I'm not leaving you. You'll just stay there for a little while. And I promise, I swear, I'll come back for you." They pulled Lena away. She didn't cry anymore, she just stared back at Elise, eyes filled with betrayal, as if the world had failed her all over again. Elise stood frozen, powerless, feeling her heart being crushed in someone else's hands. That image, it broke something inside Michael. He saw Elise crumbling. He saw the fear in Lena's eyes. And suddenly, he realized he had been wrong. Running from the past had only brought more pain to the people he loved most. That night, he said nothing. He just sat quietly beside Elise. The next morning, he changed. He took off the $1,000 suit, pulled on a pair of jeans and a plain t-shirt. The ruthless CEO was gone. "I can't fix what happened to Leo," Michael said to Elise, his voice raw and hoarse. "But maybe I can get this one thing right." Then, he got to work. He called the top attorney from his firm. He used every resource, every ounce of strategy that had made him a powerful businessman. This time, not for profit, but to fight. They didn't just prove Elise's love. They dug into the aunt's past, exposing her gambling habits, crippling debts, and years of neglect. Michael turned the custody hearing into a battle, one he refused to lose. In court, when the aunt's lawyer tried to paint Elise as an unstable grieving mother, it was Michael who stood up. He didn't talk about his business or money. He talked about pain, about regret, about how a silent little girl had shown him and his wife how to hope again. His words rang so true. The whole courtroom fell silent. They won. Temporary custody was granted to the Carters. When they arrived at the care center together, Lena was huddled in a corner of the playground, knees tucked to her chest. The moment she saw Elise, her eyes lit up. She ran, throwing herself into Elise's arms. Then, she looked up hesitantly at Michael. Michael knelt down slowly, eye level with her. His gaze was no longer cold, only gentle, only sorry. Lena hesitated, her little body tensed. But then, she stretched out her tiny hand toward him. Michael took it, feeling like he was grasping hold of something far bigger than himself. He was holding their future. They had won a battle, but the real war, the war against the past, against fate, against time, was only just beginning. They walked out of that courtroom as a family of three. A family built on pain, forgiveness, and a promise. What they didn't know was that promise would soon be tested by a truth far harsher than any courtroom fight. Sometimes, happiness is simply about filling an empty space. The car pulled up to the $1 million mansion, but the suffocating silence that once lingered was gone. In its place came the soft pitter-patter of Lena's footsteps as she timidly explored her new world. For the first time, the cold, lifeless estate had something money could never buy: laughter. The pure, innocent laughter of a child echoed through the grand living room, chasing away the ghosts of the past. The gilded house was finally beginning to feel like a real home. Michael and Elise spent their days cleaning out Leo's old room. They didn't throw anything away. Instead, they carefully packed his belongings into memory boxes. They painted the walls a bright sunshine yellow, hanging up drawings made by Lena herself. The room was reborn, just like they were. Elise rediscovered the quiet joy of motherhood. She read Lena bedtime stories every night, braided her hair each morning, and listened to her endless, silly stories after school. Lena had started going to school, still shy, but already making her first little friends. One evening, as Elise tucked her into bed, Lena suddenly turned around, wrapped her tiny arms around Elise's neck, and whispered the words Elise had longed to hear for 7 long years. "I love you, Mommy." Elise's heart burst with happiness. She hugged Lena tightly, tears streaming down her cheeks. But this time, they were tears of joy. They had become a family, a real family. But happy moments always seemed to slip by too fast. One quiet weekend afternoon, as the family played out in the yard, Michael received a call from an unknown number. He answered, and on the other end came a voice that sent a chill straight down his spine. "Michael, it's me, Sophia. I'm in Los Angeles. We need to talk." His world stopped. Sophia, the name he had tried to bury. The woman who had triggered the tragic chain of events all those years ago, was back. Michael glanced at Elise and Lena, laughing together on the grass, and a cold sweat broke out on the back of his neck. Elise had forgiven him, but was this happiness just an illusion? Would the ghosts of his past come back to take it all away? Panic surged through him. He blurted out something about an urgent work meeting and bolted out of the house. He had to deal with this before it destroyed the family he had fought so hard to rebuild. At the same time, Elise felt something was off. Lena, who was usually so lively, had been complaining of feeling tired lately. She'd often doze off on the couch after school, her complexion looking unusually pale. Elise thought maybe it was just exhaustion from adjusting to school life. But then, disaster struck. During a beach trip to Santa Monica, Lena was happily building a sandcastle when, out of nowhere, she staggered, clutching her chest, and collapsed. She passed out cold. Elise's terrified scream shattered the joyful atmosphere of the beach. She clutched Lena's limp, fragile body, frantically calling her name. People rushed over. The piercing wail of ambulance sirens filled the air. In that moment, Elise felt like she was reliving the nightmare from 7 years ago. History was repeating itself, only crueler this time. At the hospital, after hours of agonizing waiting, the doctor finally came out with a grave expression. "I'm very sorry, Mrs. Carter. Lena has a complex congenital heart defect known as tetralogy of Fallot. Her condition has advanced to a very critical stage. We're not sure how it went undetected for so long. A heart condition, but it can be treated, right? Surgery, we can do anything." Elise stammered, clinging desperately to a sliver of hope. The elderly doctor shook his head, his eyes filled with quiet sympathy. At this stage, surgery carries extremely high risks, and the prognosis is poor. Her heart is very weak. We will do everything we can. But you need to prepare yourselves. He hesitated, then delivered the cruelest blow. She may not have much time left. Michael arrived at the hospital just in time to hear those last devastating words. He froze in the doorway, his face turning pale. He had just escaped one ghost from his past, only to be met with a death sentence in the present. It felt like fate was punishing him, giving him a taste of happiness, the chance to be a father again, only to rip it away in the most painful way possible. Elise looked at her husband, then back toward the ICU room where Lena lay, the fragile happiness they had borrowed from life. It seemed like it was finally time to pay it back. Their borrowed time was running out. The happy memories they had built now stabbed like sharp thorns. The cruel clock of fate had begun ticking down the final moments. They were facing a new battle. Not against the law, not against people, but against destiny itself. Hope was like a flickering candle in the middle of a storm. In the cold hospital corridors, Michael and Elise clung to it with everything they had. They refused to give up. They reached out to the top heart specialists in the country, poured every last dollar of their fortune into searching for a miracle. And then, one day, it seemed like a miracle had arrived. The hospital informed them that a matching donor heart had been found for Lena. A little boy named Daniel, from a small town a few hours away, had suffered a tragic accident and was declared brain dead. His heart was almost a perfect match. Tears of relief poured down their faces. For the first time in weeks, they could see a glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel. Elise threw her arms around Michael, feeling the trembling in his shoulders. "We have hope now, sweetheart," she whispered. "We're going to save her." But that flickering candle of hope was quickly rattled by a cruel, unforgiving wind. Just hours later, the lead surgeon returned, looking conflicted. The family of the donor boy. They've agreed to the donation, but they have one request. A very personal one. They want to meet the family who will be receiving their son's heart. They want to know who their child will continue living through. This request wasn't illegal, but it was extremely rare and sensitive. Elise nodded immediately. "Of course, we'll meet them. Whatever they need." But Michael froze. His eyes fell on the file sitting on the doctor's desk, skimming over the words until his heart seemed to stop when he reached the cause of Daniel's death. Death caused by traumatic brain injury in a car accident. Michael's world collapsed all over again. What was fate trying to do to him? He, the man who had killed his own son in a car crash, now had to face another family who had just lost their child in a car accident. To ask them to give up their child's heart, this wasn't punishment. This was something far crueler. A brutal mirror, forcing him to confront the very demon he'd spent years trying to bury. "I can't go," he said to Elise once they were alone, his voice shaking. "You go. Say whatever you need to." I can't look them in the eye. Elise took his hand. His palm was ice cold. She looked straight into his eyes, into the man she had forgiven. "Michael, look at me," she said softly but firmly. "You're not the man you were 7 years ago. You've changed. Pain doesn't define who you are, how you face it does. We're going together. I'm not letting you face this alone." They drove to the small town. The Garcia family didn't live in a mansion, but in a modest, cozy wooden house, now shrouded in the heaviness of grief. Daniel's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Garcia, greeted them at the door. Their eyes swollen and red from endless tears, they sat across from each other in the living room. No one spoke. The silence pressed down on both families like a crushing weight. Finally, Mr. Garcia, a carpenter with calloused hands, broke the silence, his voice raw. "Our boy, he was our whole world. We just need to know that his heart will be loved. I'm sorry if I'm being blunt, but how could people like you possibly understand this pain?" The question cut straight through Michael like a blade. This was the moment. He could lie, paint a pretty picture to get what he needed, or he could lay bare the ugliest scar of his life. He took a deep breath. He looked at Elise and saw encouragement in her eyes. Then he looked directly at Mr. Garcia. "I understand," Michael said, his voice cracking. "I understand more than you could ever know. Because 7 years ago, I lost my son too. His name was Leo." Mrs. Garcia let out a soft sob. "And he died in a car accident," Michael continued, each word like a hammer pounding against his own chest. Tears streamed down his face, and he didn't wipe them away. "And the driver that night was me. I'm the one who killed my own son." The room went completely still, broken only by Michael's choked sobs. He had exposed everything, his weakness, his guilt, the rawest, deepest pain of a father. Mr. Garcia stared at him, stunned. Slowly, the suspicion in his eyes faded, replaced by shock. And then, gradually, by a profound understanding. He no longer saw a wealthy businessman trying to buy a heart. He saw another father, another broken soul, crushed under the same unbearable weight of grief and regret. Mr. Garcia stood, walked over, and placed a hand on Michael's shoulder. He didn't say a word, he just gave him 2 firm pats. A simple gesture between men, yet it carried forgiveness, empathy, and acceptance more powerful than 1,000 words. On the drive home, Michael and Elise didn't speak. They just held each other's hands tightly. He hadn't just gone to find a heart for Lena. He had gone searching for redemption. He'd walked into that home carrying the crushing guilt of a broken man, but walked out as a father who had been understood. The miracle hadn't happened in the operating room. It had happened in a small living room where 2 grieving hearts met, and healing was found through shared pain. Miracles are born from the human heart, but fate always has its own path. Lena's heart transplant surgery lasted 8 grueling hours, 8 hours that felt like a lifetime, where Michael and Elise could do nothing but clasp their hands in prayer, placing all their hopes in the skilled hands of the surgeons and in a brave little heart learning to beat for the first time in a brand new chest. When the lead surgeon finally emerged, his face was exhausted, but there was a quiet smile of relief. The surgery was a success. The new heart is working. She's a fighter. Joy came crashing over them like a tidal wave, washing away all fear and anxiety. They had done it. They had won. Michael and Elise clung to each other, sobbing like children. They had been given a second chance. The following days were filled with hope. Lena slowly regained consciousness. She was weak, but color returned to her cheeks. Michael and Elise took turns sitting at her bedside, reading stories, and telling her about the brave boy named Daniel who had given her the most precious gift. They promised Lena that when she got better, the whole family would visit the resting places of Daniel and Leo to thank the 2 little angels watching over them. But that happiness didn't last long. About a week after the surgery, Lena developed a high fever. Her vitals deteriorated rapidly. The doctors rushed to run tests. The results landed like a hammer blow. "We're so sorry," the head doctor said heavily. "This is acute rejection." Despite the perfect initial match, Lena's body is rejecting the new heart. "We've used the most aggressive anti-rejection treatments, but nothing is working. Her immune system is simply too complex. We've done everything we can." Those words hit harder than the first death sentence. They had touched heaven, only to be thrown straight back into hell. They had beaten people, beaten the past, but now they were losing to the brutal laws of nature, of life and death. Every effort, every sacrifice, every prayer, all of it felt meaningless. The days that followed were days of learning how to say goodbye. Lena, with a child's quiet wisdom, seemed to understand. She stopped asking when she would go home. One afternoon, with only Elise by her side, Lena weakly grabbed her hand. "Mom," she whispered, her breath shallow, "I want to go home." "Yes, sweetheart. When you're better, we'll go back to our big house." Elise forced a smile, though her tears were ready to fall. Lena shook her head, her clear, innocent eyes locking onto Elise's. "Not that house. I want to go back to my old home, where the rainbow comes after the storm." Elise's heart shattered into pieces. Lena didn't want to die in a sterile, cold hospital room. She wanted to go back to where everything began, where she belonged. Michael and Elise, hearts breaking, decided to grant their daughter's final wish. They signed the hospice release papers, despite the doctor's objections. They brought Lena back to that desolate little town. The collapsed shack was still there, but wildflowers had begun to bloom. They didn't stay in the ruins. They pitched a small tent on a nearby hilltop, the same hill where Lena had first seen Elise quietly stacking bricks. The sunset spread a fiery orange glow across the sky. Michael and Elise sat on either side of Lena, holding her frail little body close. Her tiny frame was weak, but her eyes sparkled brightly as she gazed at the horizon. "Look, Mommy." "A rainbow," Lena whispered, though there wasn't a single drop of rain. Maybe, in those fading eyes, she was seeing her very own rainbow. Michael told Lena about Leo, about the dreams he had for his son. Elise told Lena about the little purple wildflower, about how this brave girl had taught her how to love again. They didn't cry anymore. A strange, peaceful calm enveloped them. Lena smiled, a soft, peaceful smile. She closed her eyes slowly, her breathing faded, and then stopped altogether in the arms of her parents. She slipped away, as gently as a leaf drifting from its branch. They laid Lena to rest on that hilltop, beside a young tree they planted in her memory. They didn't return to the cold mansion in Beverly Hills. Instead, they sold it. Michael poured all the money, along with their life savings, into creating a foundation, the Lena and Leo Foundation. The foundation didn't build skyscrapers. It built small schools, simple clinics for children in disaster-stricken areas. The first project was run by none other than Mr. and Mrs. Garcia, Daniel's parents, in the very village where it had all begun. Months later, during the opening ceremony of the first school, Michael and Elise stood quietly in a corner, watching local children laugh and play in the new schoolyard. Mr. Garcia walked up beside them. "Our two children. They'd be so proud," he said softly. Elise smiled, a true smile. Her tears still fell, but they were no longer tears of sorrow, but of love. She glanced at Michael and squeezed his hand tightly. Their house was gone, but they had found a home, a much bigger family, built not from blood, but from unimaginable loss and a love reborn from the ashes. Not every child is born to stay with their parents forever, but every child, no matter how briefly they grace this world, has the power to resurrect a broken heart. The story of Lena, Leo, and Daniel wasn't a tragedy, it was a lesson. A lesson that sometimes we don't get to choose our blood, but we always have the power to choose love. Life isn't always a cheerful melody. It's a symphony, filled with every note imaginable, brilliant, soaring highs and heartbreaking, soul-crushing lows. We spend so much of our lives chasing happiness, forgetting that it's often the quiet ache of loss, the nameless sorrows that shape us the most deeply. There are pains that come and take pieces of our soul, but if we look closely, they don't just take, they leave behind spaces. And it's through those spaces that the light has a chance to shine in. They teach us about impermanence, about the preciousness of every breath, every fleeting moment. They force us to slow down, to look inward, and to ask ourselves, what truly matters? We often think family is defined by where we were born, by those who share our blood. But life teaches us a far greater lesson. Sometimes, the strongest bonds are woven from the threads of shared understanding. It happens when two pains recognize each other, when two strangers realize they carry the same scars. Family, perhaps, isn't always a place we come from. It's the people who make us feel like we've finally come home. Each of us carries ghosts from the past, regrets we wish we could undo. We build thick walls of silence, of escape, thinking it will keep us safe. But the weight of secrets can be heavier than the truth. True healing doesn't come from denial, it comes from the courage to expose our wounds to the light, to accept that we are imperfect. And maybe the hardest, yet most liberating form of forgiveness is forgiving ourselves. In the end, we learn that the value of a life isn't measured by its length. Some lives are like shooting stars, brief, bright, and gone in an instant, yet powerful enough to light up the darkest journeys. Some lives are like bittersweet songs, ending far too soon, yet their melody lingers on in the hearts of those left behind. Meaning isn't found in how long we live, but in how deeply we have loved. So if this story leaves anything behind in your heart, let it be this reminder. Live fully, right here, right now. Dare to love, even though love comes with the risk of loss. Dare to face your shadows, because that's where your true strength lies. And let your pain transform not into a burden, but into compassion, so you can understand and embrace the pain of others. Because in the end, when everything else fades away, when status and wealth turn to dust, the only thing that remains, the only thing that ever truly mattered, is the love we gave and the love we received. If this story touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Be part of the current. Like this video. Comment with your thoughts. And most of all, share it with someone who could use a little hope today. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel to hear more stories that just might change your life. Thank you for listening and see you in the next video.